Gaming Bolt presents 15 disturbing game over screens in video games. In general, one of the last things you want to do in a video game is die. It stops forward momentum, it forces you to retread ground, and in terms of a difficulty spike, it can be somewhat annoying. While games as a universal whole need some challenge pushing back against the player, and death isn't going away, some games take the chance to make that failure state, the game over screen, a part of their identity. Then there's these 15 games that just get a little bit messed up in that pursuit. Make sure to share your favorite examples in the comments below. Batman: Arkham Knight. When the Dark Knight falls finally, due to a lucky shot from that one goon with the AK you didn't see, one of the big bads will emerge from the surrounding darkness to deliver the final indignity, mocking the big bat for failing in his crusade. Now, most of the time, and through most of the series, that's all the game over screen is. A final taunt from a literal comic book villain. But certain scenes within Batman: Arkham Knight will trigger the appearance of Joker, with a very different allusion to Bruce not being the one in control anymore, and the Joker virus having taken over his body. The psychopathic clown prince of crime, with the physical assets of Batman making him unstoppable, that is a nightmare situation. Body horror of losing yourself aside. Final Fight. The over-the-top Final Fight series of beat-em-ups never tried to take itself too seriously, but man, when Capcom wanted to try to guilt you out of your quarters, they guilted hard. While the setup of the muscular Mayor Mike Haggar or one of the other characters being bound in chains, while an explosive fuse grows ever shorter is no more out of place in a Roadrunner cartoon, the terror in the fighter's eyes as they desperately blow on the fuse in a survival bid tells the story that the poor coyote never does. For want of a quarter, Mayor Haggar is survived by his wife, 2 kids, and his mustache. Ninja Gaiden Arcade. Long before Ryu Hayabusa would battle the fiends on the Xbox 360, or even before he would protect the demon statue and avenge his father on the NES in a tough-as-nails platformer, Ninja Gaiden was an arcade beat-em-up on the same level, and with roughly the same aesthetic as Final Fight. At least until you lost your final life, and bear witness to this terrifying game over screen. The collected Hayabusa is now chained down within a hellscape of flesh and creatures, a saw blade ominously shuddering ever closer to tearing up his insides. The terror in his eyes is palpable, hoping that you have a new quarter. Brain Dead 13. One of the ancestors of titles like Detroit Become Human, and similar to titles like Dragon's Lair, the animated adventure Brain Dead 13 has quite a lot of failure states and accompanying death scenes, fully animated and complete with gross sound effects. Don't move fast enough and perhaps a goon sneaks up on you, stuffs your head in a blender and reduces you to a smoothie. Or a parasite could dig straight through your chest and out the back, snacking on your heart along the way. A trip into a vat of acid could leave your skeleton floating bare. Not guarding yourself around a seductive vampire could see her sucking your life dry. It's an interactive cartoon with more than enough nightmare fuel to keep your imagination going for years. The Amazing Spider-Man vs. the Kingpin. When you think about Sega CD, you think about a different kind of nightmare fuel, as game developers try to push really bad CGI and pre-rendered video on consoles. When you think of Spider-Man, odds are you think of about 6 other villains before Kingpin ever comes up. Yet, when you lose the final battle against the gang leader in the Sega CD classic, The Amazing Spider-Man vs. the Kingpin, many kids next saw their web-slinging hero and his wife dangled above a vat of acid. Not satisfied with the implication, we see the act of the two being lowered into the vat and turned into an unpleasant meat goo due to your failings. The Legend of Zelda: Majora's Mask. The seminal 2000 N64 title, The Legend of Zelda: Majora's Mask, changed up a whole lot about what makes a Zelda game. The identity of Majora's Mask is something far more personal. Instead, you become tangled in the plans of a mischievous sprite with an evil mask. The fiery hellscape that will swallow Link and the lives of all those around him should he fail his quest is burned in the minds of all those who see the game over screen to this depressing game. Punisher Arcade. Another piece of work by Capcom's classic arcade guilt-tripping. Should the player fail to make it through the entire adventure in the classic Punisher arcade game, you'll be forced to watch his sidekick frantically delivering CPR to the battered and bruised anti-hero, who will flatline right there on the streets he was trying to defend without a 25-cent infusion to resuscitate him. A true example of how expressive Pixels can be, the sheer look of despair on the man's face when that timer hits 0 tells you all you need to know about his forthcoming PTSD and battle with alcoholism. Isle of the Dead. Do you remember Isle of the Dead? Yeah, that's probably for a good reason. Unlike Chex Quest and its irreverent ripping off of the popular shooters of the time, Isle of the Dead is one of the most derivative Wolfenstein 3D knockoffs of the era, with poor shooting mechanics, level design, and even worse art design. When you die, and you'll die many times, the game can pull up a variety of scenes kinda like Brain Dead 13, except not good. The most disturbing of the bunch being simply from quitting the game, and it depicts the protagonist spreading his own brains against the walls because you needed to go to work. Time Splitters 2. Much of this list has had the disturbing stuff right out in the open, but the cult classic GameCube shooter Time Splitters 2 made you look for this Easter egg. Sit on the mission failed screen for several minutes and you'll begin to hear some disturbing noises. The slow, guttural grunting sounds like the cries of hell itself. We won't spoil what they actually are, but listening even further beyond has another clip. A woman asking, "Is that too loud?" No, mystery woman. My nightmares heard that just fine.
Is that too loud?
Mirror's Edge. While the vast majority of this list focuses on the shocking or the surreal to qualify as disturbing, the reality is that death could be considered as rather uneventful. The utter terror of the encroaching void is exemplified by how you die in Mirror's Edge. Missing that leap of faith between two buildings and plummeting to the street below is nothing more than a long fall, with blackness and a sudden thud at the end. Primal and disturbingly realistic. Why some people want this in VR baffles me. The Last of Us. Joel and Ellie's excellent adventure through the diseased world of The Last of Us is just crawling with walkers of all shapes and mutations. And while one of the themes of this game is that man is a bigger threat than zombie, the death scenes from clicker encounters and the like sure do their best to make them also seem as terrifying as they are. The guttural screams of Joel or Ellie as they have their flesh bitten into by a clicker. The pain on their faces and sudden musical cue are a sharp reminder of the kind of world this is, and will elevate your anxiety the next time you hear those telltale clicks. Doom 2016. In id's Return of the King, sometimes referred to as Doom 2016, the Doomslayer is an unstoppable force of anger to be reckoned with. With how powerful it feels to command the legendary Space Marine through the hordes of demons, ripping and tearing the denizens of hell to gibs, it's easy to forget that they're still demons. The only reason the demons aren't that scary is just because you're scarier. But when they do get the upper hand on Doom Guy, the rain of guts that comes down from their assaults can leave you staring at your own disembodied head. Dead Space. In space, nobody can hear you scream. Isaac Clarke isn't the only thing creeping through the halls of the derelict space station of Dead Space. The necromorphs that the engineer comes up against are twisted and mutated forms that will, without so much as a second thought or any remorse, tear him completely apart should he fail to keep them off. His remaining corpse will likely rise itself as just another necromancer. Limbo. The world of Limbo has more than enough disturbing implications all on its own, and the myriad ways the player can bite the dust in the game all add on to the terrible dread of the world. The one constant of the adventure? That no matter how the boy meets his end, it's all too quick with a crunch sound while the boy closes his glowing eyes. You can't help but feel sorry for him, meeting his end within the dire world of Limbo. Theme Park. While, like Roller Coaster Tycoon in many aspects, if the player failed to manage their theme park to the level that it needed to be, the failure screen shows an FMV of your desk, pictures of your family looking on with a strong implication of the manager of the theme park leaping to their death. It's a kid's game.
And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from Gaming Bolt, you can always hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon next to it. That way you will never miss any of our videos.